starting with sensory perception. Last week we finished with thought content. So if you have your assessment, if you want to pull it out, that's fine. If not, this is in the Lucas book, it's also in your handout.
I'm sorry, where did we go?
We left off, we did thought content, and now we're on letter F, sensory perception.
Wait, are you on this?
Functional assessment.
Oh, we're right here on this, so I can just take notes on
You
that.
could, yep, you
Okay,
can.
last week. Okay, that's great.
If you have the assessment itself, you have this, you have this, the assessment tool itself.
So what's this that should be in here? Those were different.
Are we gonna finish the
You have
rest
the
of this
tool
tonight?
itself. This is,
I have another pen.
we're only going on as far on that assessment as we are on the script.
Oh.
Okay.
Step up to that.
Okay, so letter F, sensory perception. So if you remember back to last week's lecture, when we came to each new piece of content, I basically gave you a question that the particular category was trying to answer, okay? With sensory perception, what we're looking to assess is whether or not there are any indications
I even have one of those.
of illusions, and I'm going to explain what they are, or hallucinations. Okay, so for sensory perception, what we're trying to answer in this particular category is whether or not the client is demonstrating or voicing any indications of illusions or hallucinations.
What page is this one?
Okay, it's section F, sensory perception. Okay, so if the person has not demonstrated anything that leads you to think that they are experiencing either illusions or hallucinations, you would check unremarkable. Sight problems and hearing problems are something you have to be aware of, okay? But they are not necessarily indicators of illusions or hallucinations. Sight problems and hearing problems are more indicators of physical challenges, like we talked about last week, okay?
So,
Wait,
Illusions, yep,
you said the sight problems and hearing problems isn't sensory perception? Then what?
they are not necessarily indicators of sensory perception problems. They're not necessarily indicators of illusions or hallucinations.
Then why is it under this category?
Because oftentimes, someone who has particularly hearing challenges doesn't respond to what we're saying, okay? So our observation may be that they're off somewhere else, okay? And we may think that they are thinking other things, that their mind is somewhere else, maybe that they're hearing voices in their head, and so they're responding to the voices in their head, as opposed to, it may just be a hearing challenge, okay? So sometimes we have to rule it out. And that's why in the beginning of the interview and in the beginning of the assessment, like we talked about last week, one of the things we want to be aware of are any physical challenges that the person faces, including things like hearing challenges, sight challenges, okay? We want to be careful about sort of not getting to this point and seeing something and kind of jumping to a conclusion, okay? So when we talk about illusions, specifically what we mean by an illusion is that, and I'll give you an example after I tell you the definition again, this is in Lucas, okay? An illusion is when someone, obviously in this particular case we'll say a client. An illusion is when a client or the person is convinced, and I'm going to say it a couple of times and then I'll give you an example again. The client is convinced about a a misperceived normal sensory event. The client, an illusion, the client is convinced about a misperceived normal sensory event. In other words, something happens that's a very normal event, and the client has a misperception, a misunderstanding. Their take on it is very different than what the actual event really is, okay? So, it's fall, I'm outside. In the fall, a normal sensory event is to see leaves falling and to hear leaves rustling around, okay? That's a normal sensory event in the fall, agreed? Okay, we've all seen leaves fall, we've all heard leaves rustling, we've probably all walked through leaves and you hear that sound that they make, okay? That's a normal sensory event. A misperceived normal sensory event, using that same example, is that it's fall, the leaves are falling, I hear the rustling of the leaves, and I take shelter under the desk because a tornado is coming, okay? That's a misperception about a normal sensory event. Normally, when we hear leaves rustle, it doesn't mean a tornado's coming, okay? What I do is I take a normal sensory event and I misperceive it, okay? I go to the ocean, I take a walk along the ocean wall in Narragansett, I notice that the waves are pretty high, and I run for high ground because a tsunami's coming, okay? I take a normal sensory event, and I misperceive what it means, okay? So we're not talking about, I go to the ocean and I take a walk and the real reason I go there is because I've heard on Channel 10 weather that, you know, there's a big gale storm coming and I know the waves are gonna be high and they've said on the weather the waves are gonna be 12 feet high and I think that's cool, let's go take a look at it. And I just kind of go for the fun of it, okay? That's not an example of a misperceived normal sensory event, okay? Because I go expecting to see high waves, and I just observe the waves and I don't think anything more of it, okay? So normal sensory event, and normally, in terms of sensory, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, it involves the 5 senses: sight, hearing, taste, sound, smell. Those are the five senses, okay? So that's an illusion. A hallucination, which is different, and again, sometimes we use these words synonymously, like last week when we talked about obsessive compulsive behaviors. I said sometimes we use those synonymously, we kind of use them all in the same sentence, and they're very different. So are illusions and hallucinations, okay? Hallucinations are an experience that one has, and again, I'm going to say this, then I'm going to give you examples. An experience that one has involving one of the 5 senses. So an experience that one has involving one of the 5 senses. And the experience, again, just write this down, then I'm going to explain it. And the experience is unrelated. The experience is unrelated to any external stimuli. Okay? So again, a hallucination is when we have an experience that involves one of the 5 senses, and it is unrelated to any external stimuli. Let me give you some examples. The 5 senses: sight, smell, touch, taste, and those are the 5 senses. We learned about those in probably 2nd, 3rd grade, okay? Sight or hallucinations involving the sense of sight are visual hallucinations. And I'm going to give you examples of all of these. Hallucinations involving the sense of smell. Anybody know?
Olfactory.
Olfactory, good.
It's not fun.
Oh, you
Olfactory.
have it?
Either that or they're looking at the handouts.
No, I knew it anyway.
Good job, Kristen.
Psychology.
Okay, good. I'm glad you remembered it. How about involving the sense of touch? Anyone remember? Tactile, good. Awesome.
You guys are smart.
Okay, tactile. How about taste? This is a good word. Gustatory.
What?
It's a funny, it's like.
I feel like I'm
Gustav.
playing
That's how
Jeopardy.
you're supposed to remember it.
Gustatory.
You're supposed to remember it like the chef who stole in that
Okay.
movie, in the rat movie,
What is-
Ratatouille.
Oh, I love that.
What do them words have to do with them
I'm
words?
going to tell you.
They mean the same thing.
Okay, how about hearing? Anyone remember hearing?
Auditory.
I want
Auditory or,
My lord.
Auditory.
okay, auditory. Okay, or another way of saying that is hearing. So these are the formal diagnosis words, if you will, for the 5 senses.
So if I was to
okay?
rate it, that's
So
what
if you are experiencing a hallucination where you are seeing things, rather than saying
I know
you're
that,
experiencing
that's all.
a hallucination involving sight, you say the client exhibited or demonstrated visual hallucinations as observed by the client running over and talking to the green monster in the corner that was not there. Okay? Okay? So visual involves sight. Olfactory hallucinations involve the sense of smell. Tactile involves the sense of touch. Gustatory involves the sense of taste. And auditory, the sense of hearing. So hallucinations are always related to one or more, sometimes 2, 3, okay? But hallucinations are always related to the 5 senses. These are the 5 senses, okay? So a client who typically experiences auditory hallucinations is hearing something. And it can be voices, it can be sounds, okay? It can be static, it can be chatter, okay? But a person who is having auditory hallucinations is hearing something that is not there, okay? Yep.
I got a question, because it's asked of me constantly whenever I go to different therapists. How come they always say to you, are you hearing voices that aren't there? Are you seeing people that aren't there? How would I know? If I'm seeing someone right there, how am I gonna know?
I think they're there.
Well, what they, I mean,
What
that's
do
a
you think
lousy
they're
way
there?
for them to ask the question. What they're saying is, and you can tell them I said something.
I will. Actually, I will.
What they're saying is, are you seeing?
I know what you're asking me, but
When they say that's not there, what they mean is that for me, it's not there. But someone who's experiencing hallucinations, if anyone's ever worked, again, this is not about, comedy or being funny. This is about
Yeah.
people who
Right,
really
yeah.
are tortured.
But if they're alone,
So-
how do they know it's not there? How do they know it's fake?
when they don't.
They don't know, and that's the whole thing, okay?
Oh, yeah.
So, hold on, folks, we really have a lot to get through, okay, one at a time, let me finish for a second. If I'm experiencing one or more of these hallucinations, for me, it is real. It doesn't matter what you tell me, whether it's there, it's not there, I'm not hearing it, I'm hearing it, this is my reality. So, the only way I can discern this is through observation and through my interview questions. Now, for many clients, their frame of reference is right here, okay? So if I've been having visual hallucinations all my life, I have nothing else to compare it to. So that's my reality, okay? So we can't necessarily rely on the client in terms of being an accurate or a good reporter, because it's your reality. So I have to have 101 questions in my bag of tricks to be able to figure out if you are experiencing visual hallucinations. Usually people who are experiencing visual hallucinations are able to tell you about it, or you will see through your observation them responding to a visual hallucination, okay? You'll see their eye movement, maybe follow someone or something that's not in the room and that's my reality, okay? You'll see something,
That's creepy.
okay? This is
really
torturous.
creepy for the
It's not funny, it's torturous. Think about what this feels like and walk in this person's shoes, right? Olfactory involves the sense of smell. Now, if anybody read yesterday's Sunday Journal, extremely interesting article in the Journal yesterday about soldiers returning from war who experience primarily olfactory and auditory hallucinations, okay? So very new form of treatment based on significant research that has taken place with soldiers returning within the last 3 years from war around treatment of olfactory and auditory hallucinations involves exposing soldiers who are experiencing PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, specifically olfactory and auditory hallucinations, treatment involving the exposure of those soldiers to particular smells and sounds in an effort to desensitize them, okay? So one of the things that they use in treatment for soldiers now, currently, is to expose them to things like the smell of certain oils, the smell of certain foods, maybe based on the country they served, the smell of gunpowder, the smell of burning flesh, okay? Things that soldiers smell in an effort to desensitize them. The same thing for auditory hallucinations, okay? If you've ever worked with anyone who is a soldier recovering from service and particularly from war, you will find it very common for soldiers to tell you that, they may be at the beach on a beautiful summer day and a helicopter flies over, okay? And that sound of that helicopter is enough to put them right back into the war. It doesn't matter that they're on a beautiful beach in the here and present, okay? So sound, all right? So, olfactory hallucinations involve the sense of smell. Oftentimes for victims of abuse, they are able to tell you, and this was true of many victims that I worked with, they would be able to tell you or tell me what the scent of cologne was that their offender wore. And so if they were, let's say, molested as a child, and they're now 50 years old, every time they smell Old Spice in the here and now, it takes them back to when they were 5, because the smell is the hallucination. It takes them right back, and for some people it can be as if the person's right in front of them, even though they're safe, the offender's not around, all of those kinds of things, okay?
So like that treatment that they're using with the smell and hearing, is that like what's called in vivo or flooding?
Yes, very similar to that. But it's a very new treatment for PTSD, because typically the treatment for PTSD is not to sort of immerse the soldier in the experience again, it's to try to get them some distance. But what they're finding is that kind of treatment, that sort of immersion treatment, is more, they have more success in terms of shortening the period of the PTSD, right? Kind of interesting, very interesting article. Gustatory, the sense of taste. For many clients who are in mental health, either settings, group homes, that kind of thing, outpatient settings, they're on significant medications. Many medications have side effects, you all know that. One of the side effects for many medications is a sense of taste, okay? And for many clients, they'll report that they always taste metal or iron. If you've ever been on medication that has that as a side effect, it's lousy, right? But the good thing is, typically you take the medication, once you're done with the prescription, you're done with it, okay? People who have gustatory hallucinations always taste the same thing, whatever that taste may be, okay? So it can be long lasting. It's not like I'm taking a medication and 10 days from now the side effect is going to be gone, okay? So, visual hallucinations, I'm seeing something, olfactory, I'm smelling something. Tactile involves the sense of touch, okay? So the example being that I'm in a room and I feel, even though no one is touching me, I feel like someone is touching me, okay? Or I touch something, maybe I've survived a traumatic event like a fire, and so I touch something and everything feels like it's burning hot, even though it really isn't, okay? Tactile involves the sense of touch, okay? So, the difference between illusions and hallucinations are significant. We can't use them synonymously, okay? Does that make sense? All right? And oftentimes, for clients, for folks who are experiencing hallucinations, they sometimes can be short-term, but more often for people with major mental illnesses, these hallucinations are lifelong. And think about what that's like. Think about what that must feel like and try to walk in that person's shoes. And how torturous is it to then try to have sort of your life and live your life every day when you're hearing things or you're seeing things or you're smelling things, none of which is based in reality, especially when for you, that's your reality. Because who are you going to tell, right? That's not something I'm going to be forthright about telling. Josie?
No, I just have a comment. I have a lady, I work for in a hospital, and this lady, she was in the fire, the club fire in West
Station
Warwick.
fire, yeah.
Like her body was 90% burned,
Yeah.
and every time, if we're gonna do like a fire drill in the whole hospital, like they have to let her know ahead of time, so she cannot be there, because she just go like back to when that happened.
Absolutely,
And she-
absolutely.
I feel bad.
Absolutely, and if you know, that's a good example. So if you go, for example, to Providence Performing Arts Center, and there's, you're there for a show, and the show involves the use of fireworks, pyrotechnics, you'll notice that before the show, they make an announcement. And it's exactly for that reason. It's so that people can avoid the PTSD that happens when the firework goes off, or the sound goes off, or they see the flame. Because that's a perfect example of a PTSD, something, a significant traumatic experience. And imagine for survivors of the station fire, you may know people who survived that fire, okay? Imagine what their hallucinations involve, right? They may be able to still sort of have their everyday, functioning going on, but imagine what they saw, what they smelled, what they touched, what the taste was, and what they heard. And how do you keep moving forward from that, right? Because this is reality. It's not, oh, I'm hearing, voices in my head and I'm seeing green Martians running around. This can be based on real life experiences for people who don't necessarily have significant major mental illnesses.
She said even at home, like if the alarm goes off, like something's burning, it reminds her, it takes her
It
back
takes
to
her
the,
right back, absolutely it does,
when that happened.
Absolutely.
That's,
I live right down the street from the station,
Yep,
and my mom was burned when she was like really, really young. And so when that happened, we could smell everything, and like my mom swore her leg was on fire from when she was a child.
right, so here
But
she
she could
was,
feel it burning,
Right.
and just from. like,
and it didn't
smelling
help for you to say, Mom, your leg, right? I mean, because for her, that was her reality right then and there.
Yeah,
right?
she was like 8 years old. She could
Exactly.
feel her leg burning.
It took her right back, a
Yeah.
good example. I mean, this is not
No, it
easy
was
stuff
really,
for
it
people
was
to
a strange
experience.
experience.
Yep, yep,
Like she had to like seek counseling.
Absolutely.
Like, it really just messed with her. She
Right.
was really too young to even deal with what happened to her.
right, and that's the other thing sometimes that happens, is if you haven't had treatment
Yeah.
around what the significant event was, let's say for your mom, she was 8, she
Yeah.
didn't have the treatment she probably should have had to put that in perspective. So here she is, having her everyday life,
Yeah.
a tragedy like that happens, it takes her right back to 8 years old again.
Right.
And she's somewhat incapacitated,
Yeah.
right? She needs to get help to get through it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, the only other thing I'm going to do next week is cover mental capacities, which is easy to understand, okay? But again, I can't stress enough, know your Lucas readings for this lecture, these last few weeks, okay? Because this is gonna be critical for your assignment, next week. So next week, we'll start with just finishing up the mental capacities. I'll review that writing skills handout, so please read that over the course of this week. And then our guest client will be there, okay? Okay?
Yes,
Yes, clients next week. Yep. Okay, have a good week, everyone. You too. Thank you.
So I think I have the phone number, and as soon as I put it on the YouTube,
I bet
can
you
see the
will.
whole thing.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah, really good, good job.
Have a good week.
Next time you open up the bag of cool fish, there was mad about this house. Really good job.
It would say, for example, right up
Have a good one.
dress season.
Hey, you're. Bye, thank you.
Had a trouble you. Don't judge me.
You're gonna say, interviewer asked Mr. Melrose.
Where's that, down here?
Right.
Client stated why, right up observed while client was answering why.
Thank you, Mark.
Oh, you're welcome.
I finally like, remember your name. I keep calling you Michael.
That's all right.
I'm like, Michael, Michael.
So,
I keep calling him Michael because
I'm Michael.
Mike, roommate, it's all
I'm Michael.
our observation about these
Yes.
questions.
You're very good. You made it.
Here.
Very good.
remember when I was gonna say hi, how are you? I asked you, are you Mark or Mike?
Yeah,
I forgot.
That's all right.
Right.
I agreed on, because that's Joe, and in real life, that would be it.
Oh, are you mine?
I know, because you're gonna have like.
You're like 20,000 clients, you know?
You're right.
Real life.
You're right. Thank you.
I was getting into something that wasn't even
Going
there.
to apply the content here to what you saw in her. Okay? So in other words, intensity and duration, you're gonna answer that by looking at these questions and hearing what the client said around those questions, okay? And you're gonna be able to do that all the way through, okay?
The whole thing.
Yep, you're gonna describe the client's appearance, thought content,